If you had to guess what would have made a better investment in 2020 out of stocks, gold, real estate, and cars, most people would not have guessed cars. But it's true. Over the past 2 years, stocks are up 24%. Gold has stayed almost perfectly flat. Real estate is up a massive 40%, but even real estate doesn't compare to used cars, which are up over 50%. As it turns out, buying a car in 2020 is one of the best money moves you could have made. I know that sounds a bit ridiculous, because we're accustomed to cars losing a significant amount of value the second you drive it off the lot. But because of certain events over the last couple of years, cars have been appreciating at record rates. Last year, I decided I wanted to sell my old Dodge Dart, since my husband and I both got remote jobs and we no longer needed a second car. We bought it about 3 years ago for around $9,000. We wanted to sell it at a dealership because it was just so much more convenient, and I went in not expecting to be offered near what I paid for it, because obviously it's a dealership. So the salesman inspects the car, and after about 20 minutes, he tells us he can only offer us $9,000 due to some minor dings and scratches. And I was like, excuse me? Only $9,000? And he was like, yeah, well, it's in good condition, but because of the damage, I can't go any higher. So I had to settle for selling my car for the same price I bought it for 3 years ago, with several thousand more miles on it, and the wear and tear of it all, it really sucked. Totally joking. Really, I felt like I had robbed the bank that day. But as it turns out, my case really wasn't anything unique. And in fact, car prices have risen like crazy over the last few years. Now in 2022, cars have become the most unaffordable they have ever been, and repos are on the rise. Many experts believe the car market is in a bubble that could be about to pop. So I wanted to talk about why cars are in a bubble, what is likely to happen to car prices in the future, and my own advice for what you should do if you own a car or are in the market for a car right now. Now I wanted to give a quick thanks to Wealthfront for sponsoring this portion of the video. Wealthfront is an app that helps you make the most of your savings. Something I talk about a lot in my videos is the importance of maintaining a 3 to 6 month emergency fund at all times. For most people, that's around $10,000 to $20,000. But you don't want to leave that much money just lying around in a bank account that only gives you 0.01% interest. This is where the Wealthfront cash account comes in. Wealthfront just increased the APY on their cash account to 2%, one of the highest in the game. Most savings accounts don't offer nearly this much. In fact, the national average is only 0.1%. So if you're holding money in one of these accounts, you're essentially missing out on free money. Let's say you have a $20,000 emergency fund. If you held your money in a Wealthfront cash account with the current 2% APY, you would be able to earn $400 per year. Whereas if you held your money in the average savings account, you would only make $20. Not to mention, there are also zero account fees, your money is FDIC insured through partner banks, and if you ever want to invest with Wealthfront, you can move your money into their award-winning investment account to save and invest all in one place. You can start earning more on your savings with Wealthfront today using my link in the description below, or by going to wealthfront.com/Carson. Okay, now let's get back to the video. First, it's important to understand how we got to this point. Why cars are now more unaffordable than they have ever been, with most people in the auto industry believing that the car market is in a bubble. The underlying cause for why the car market is now in a bubble really goes back to early 2020 with the pandemic. The pandemic caused a lot of aspects in the economy to come to a halt and disrupted markets. The stock market crashed around 34%, and many people were afraid that we could experience mass unemployment among other things. So in an effort to rescue Americans from financial distress, the Federal Reserve stepped in and started pumping money into the economy through stimulus measures. The result of this is that many people temporarily had more income than they did before. The government gave people stimulus checks, extra unemployment aid, child tax credit payments, and all of these allowed many people to pay for pricier cars. The Federal Reserve also lowered interest rates to record lows in an effort to prop up the economy, and you can see the effect that this had on auto loan interest rates. Auto loan rates decreased to all-time lows, which meant that financing a vehicle became much cheaper than it was before. This meant that people could then buy more car for the same dollar. And considering that 85% of people use financing to purchase new vehicles, this caused demand for vehicles to go through the roof. And in a way, these stimulus measures and low interest rates had a compounding effect in terms of raising car prices, because all of this extra demand for cars caused buyers to compete with each other for the few vehicles available on the market, which further drove up car prices. So these are the main factors that have increased the demand for cars in the past couple of years that have led to car prices increasing dramatically. But when it comes to car prices and all prices, it takes two to tango: demand and supply. And on the supply side of things, it hasn't been great for the car market either. That's because the pandemic caused many supply chain shortages, and this resulted in a shortage of car parts and shipping delays in 2021. Not to mention, there's also been a global computer chip shortage, and these microchips are used in the manufacturing of all vehicles, which meant that car manufacturers were not able to make or finish enough cars to keep up with demand. General Motors reported this year that because of shortages of chips and other parts, they were forced to build 95,000 vehicles without one part or another, and these incomplete vehicles will have to be finished later this year. These shortages have put a squeeze on the used car inventory on the market. So overall, over the past 2 years, the car market has experienced a massive amount of demand for cars, but also at the same time, due to supply chain issues and parts shortages, there haven't been many cars to go around, resulting in the price of cars skyrocketing. So just how high are car prices now, and how bad has unaffordability gotten? Well, the increase in price of used cars has accelerated by a massive 44% from November 2020 to November 2021. Check out this graph of used car prices. You can see that since the pandemic, car prices have skyrocketed in price. In the middle of 2020, the average car cost around $20,000. And now, around 2 years later, the average car costs around $30,000. And this has definitely impacted most people's budgets, since now the typical car payment is around $730 a month. And that is absolutely crazy, because I remember back when I was a student in college, my rent was $925 a month. And I knew lots of other students renting for only $700 a month. So to me, $730 is more like rent money, not payment on a car. And the data shows that car unaffordability is higher than ever. Moody's Analytics Affordability Index shows that in July, it takes on average 42.2 weeks of income to purchase a new vehicle, which is of course a record high, and much higher than it was just 2 years ago. But something you might be thinking is, how did we go from this period where car prices were increasing at a rapid rate to now, where many people believe the bubble is going to collapse? Well, we can thank the Federal Reserve for that. As it turns out, the measures the Federal Reserve used to rescue Americans from financial distress in 2020 backfired. Because, surprise, surprise, printing trillions of dollars out of thin air ended up causing rampant inflation. Over the last few months, inflation has been at the highest rate in over 40 years. And because everything now is much more expensive, most people don't have enough money to continue paying their abnormally high car payments. They had enough money in 2020, when people had extra funds from things like stimulus checks. But now that temporary income has run out, and most people are having to pay more for everything else, leaving less money for their car payment. And as of today, about 1 in 12 Americans are more than 90 days late on their car payments. And with inflation becoming a big threat to the American dollar, the Fed for the last few months have been attempting to undo the inflation problem that they created by now raising interest rates. Higher interest rates makes money more costly to borrow and works to lower inflation. And raising these interest rates has made the cost of obtaining financing on a car increase. So that means that not only are cars much more expensive now, but the financing for cars is also more expensive, leaving Americans with much larger car payments. As a result of rising interest rates and inflation, more consumers are now defaulting on their auto loans, with subprime repossessions up 11% since 2020. Subprime borrowers are those not so creditworthy borrowers who may have poor credit scores or a lack of income. Basically, people that the banks would consider to be at a higher risk of defaulting on their car loan. But what's interesting is that repossessions are also up among prime borrowers, with repossessions doubling from 2% to 4% during the past 2 years. And that is a red flag that the rate of repossession for prime borrowers is starting to rise, because these are the people that are creditworthy and do have sufficient income. Overall, it's my opinion that the car market and the economy is going to be in a tough place for quite some time. Over the past few months, car prices have more or less leveled off. But do I think there's going to be a massive crash in car prices in the short to medium term? Not really. I've seen many YouTubers talking about this, and I feel like they've kind of just gone with the flow and the fear-mongering approach of telling people that the massive crash is on the way. But the truth is that there's still little supply of cars on the market, and there is still a high demand for cars despite the increased cost of ownership. I do, however, think that it's possible that we see car prices continue to remain steady or drop a little over the next year, as supply chains improve and parts shortages decrease, and as the Fed continues to raise interest rates to try to reduce inflation. Now, here's some advice I have if you're in the market for a car right now. I'm not going to tell you to hold off from buying a car in the hopes that prices might come down in the future. I've seen some people give this advice, and it's just not practical. Chances are you can't just hold off from buying a car if you need one right right now. Also, there's no knowing if and when car prices drop, so you might end up going without a car needlessly for several months, just to find out that prices haven't dropped yet. The most important thing you can do right now is buy a car that you can comfortably afford. Now, that's really simple advice, but one of the reasons why the car market is in a bubble right now is because people just don't follow this advice. Instead, they buy pricey cars that they can't afford. By buying a car you can afford, it means that even if inflation and rocky economic conditions persist, you won't be at risk of running out of money, falling late on car payments, and even defaulting on your loan and having your car repossessed. Also, if you currently own a car and you're wondering if you should sell it now before the market crashes, again, we don't know when and how much car prices will crash. So I would only recommend selling your vehicle if you're one of the people that owns a very expensive car and you simply can't afford a high monthly payment. In that case, you are better off selling your car and buying something more in your price range. So those are my thoughts on the current car market. If you guys like this video, make sure you leave a like down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.